Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today we are previewing the Myrtle Beach Pelicans season preview. Today we've got the Pelicans broadcaster Sam Wiederhaft is on the show. Sam, you're back. How you feeling? You're back from Arizona. You had a trip out there. How are things going?
Well, things are great, Greg. Thanks for bringing me on again. And the fact that I'm on your podcast means that we're getting closer to the start of the season. So just a few weeks away. But yeah, like you mentioned, I was in Arizona for the past week and always an incredible experience out there. Met so many cool people, reconnected with a lot of people and former players. And the complex is super nice. I mean, it was just a great experience overall. It was my second time being there. We were there last year too. But yeah, I did some really cool content, some awesome interviews, and yeah, it was a good time overall.
Dude, I was gonna say you were dropping all sorts of videos. You were dropping the pictures. You and BK, the best collab of 2024 so far.
Yeah,
South Bend Cubs, Myrtle Beach Pelicans. Honestly, that was pretty cool with like the content you guys were producing in leading up to and after the spring breakout game. But like that was pretty cool. We'll get to the spring breakout game in a minute, but like it's cool that you guys were all like kind of collaborating for that.
yeah. Hunter Horenstein was great with us, and then Chris Hagstrom Jones with South Bend. They're both awesome at what they do. And I mean, me and BK know each other pretty well. We went to college together, and yeah, the fact that we've been able to collaborate now on a few different projects is awesome. And he knows a lot about the system. He's a fantastic broadcaster. So to be able to do some stuff with him out there was really cool. And he has a different perspective because I get these guys when they first start, and they're a little bit more polished when they get to South Bend. So he gets to see them kind of rise up through there. But yeah, I loved it. The fact that we were both there at the same time.
I mean, both Butler guys, go Dogs.
Yeah.
They got an NIT run in them. I think they're in the NIT. I'm rocking my
Yeah.
Illinois gear those of you who are listening on the podcast platforms. I got to rock that Illini gear. Heading up to March Madness going on, but yeah, go Dogs. I mentioned the spring breakout game. We covered that a lot. I mean, we kind of covered that throughout multiple weeks on the show. But didn't really do like a preview of the game. And honestly, now like looking back, it's like probably good that we didn't go in depth as far as a preview goes because the game obviously got rained out, not being made up, not being rescheduled. What was the environment like out there as you're watching rain coming down in Mesa, Arizona?
It was depressing. I mean, we had gotten the lineup, and me and BK did a few preview videos on the field, and we were at batting practice, and the guys were taking hacks, and I caught up with BJ Murray, who I hadn't talked to in a couple of years. Kevin Alcantara was there, and I got to catch up with him. Owen Casey, who was with us in 21, he was out there taking some hacks. So the anticipation was building, and it started raining toward the end of BP, and we got off the field, and it just came down pretty hard. They put the tarp on the field, and you could tell. I mean, that field doesn't drain well because it doesn't have to drain well because it's in Arizona, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. But you could tell there were just these puddles that were kind of gathering in front of the dugout in the outfield, and I think I told BK, I was like, I don't have a good feeling about this. But the players did come out for the Cubs and the White Sox. They came out to the concourse and signed autographs. And I will say, I asked BK before the game, I was like, I don't know, how many people do you think are going to show up for this? And, with the rain chances and, just being a gloomy day in general, there were a good amount of Cubs fans there. And I think that's credit to you guys and what you do. And just the fact that, the prospects are just so well covered in the Cubs system that people know who these players are. And if the game would have happened, I think you would have seen a relatively full stadium.
Yeah, that's sweet. Honestly, the entire concept of spring breakout was really cool. Even though we didn't get to see the game, I think that like considering how much of a success it seems to be across the board for other teams who did play their games, I'm excited for it to come back next year
Yeah.
in 2025. I think it's gonna be great. I'd love to even see like more than just like one game. I know a few teams got two games, but I'd love to see more than one game. We'll see how they can make that work. I think that just having the one game was kind of a kind of chaotic and trying to get everything scheduled out. But like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of excitement. I think it was great that it was made so available, right? It was on ESPN Plus. It was on MLB.com. It was on Marquee. It was going to be on the Bleacher Nation like website. Like it was going to be everywhere. Like that's really cool to have that as an option. You know what I mean?
It didn't really shock me until after they canceled it. The fact that like looking at the lineup, like this might be the only time that we see all these guys playing together,
Yeah.
which would have been really fun. But Jim Callis brought up a really good point, and I actually talked to him at batting practice about it. But he went on Marquee and mentioned like, hey, they could make a tournament out of this thing, and the winner, the champion of the tournament, gets an extra first round pick. So, you have an incentive now for teams to build up their farm systems. And I told Jim, I was like, that is a great idea. I think that's awesome. And I think people would really get involved in it. And, it'd make the spring pretty important. Now you need some parameters around that. I think that, teams would just load that up with like AAA guys.
That's true. Yeah.
But still a really good idea. And I think the spring breakout is definitely a really good first step and just an awesome initiative.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's kick it back a little bit. Let's talk about the season last year, because I know you had a fun season last year, just like you did the year before. Before we get into previewing this season, I want to hear what some of your favorite memories are from last season in 2023, which was terrific.
Yeah, like you said, it was another fun season. Going back to the playoffs for a second year in a row was great. Playing Charleston in the first round was not great, but there were still some really good experiences throughout the season. I think clinching the first half championship at home in front of a sellout crowd was definitely something that I'll remember forever. I mean, my mom and brother were there, and my mom threw out the first pitch of that game. So having that happen and then, clinching a playoff spot and having the team celebrate on the field was all just a great moment to remember. And then in August, we played Kannapolis and we walked off 3 times in a row. It was a Miguel Pabon sac fly on Tuesday, a Johnny Long walk-off homer on Wednesday, and then Pedro Ramirez hit a walk-off double on Thursday. And there's not really too many times you can say that you've seen 3 walk-off wins all happen in a row. So that was good. But yeah, just a really fun season. I mean, the first playoff game we had in Myrtle Beach, it was our first playoff win since 2016. And we played a really good game against the Charleston River Dogs. Kevin Valdez came on in relief and pitched really well. And, just that playoff environment was just something that was really fun to look back on. But just another year of great prospects and players developing throughout the year and, collecting some wins while in the process.
Yeah, I mean, Myrtle Beach is always one of my favorite affiliates to watch. Besides you on the calls and the great broadcast team as a whole in Myrtle Beach, it's just fun seeing these players for the first time on MILB TV. It's just like it's so much fun. So I know that we're gonna get into previewing these players. I do have one question. You mentioned Johnny Long. I don't know if you know. So he's Jonathan Long, but I've heard Jonathan, I've heard Johnny, I've heard John. Do you know if he has a preference or if he's game for any name? Because if he's Johnny Long, if he's game for that, like, I think we're all game for it.
Yeah, that's sick. So when he first, and I honestly think it might have been the day of the walk-off home run. It was either that day or that week. I went up to him at BP and I said, "Hey, do you like being called Johnny?" And he was like, "Yeah, like it's, like my real name is Jonathan, but like it's like my name's Samuel, right? But I like Sam. Yeah. His is like a Jonathan Johnny kind of thing."
Okay.
And thank God I asked him, because on the walk-off call I said Johnny Long sends us home.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure I hope he enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Johnny Long, that's like his Instagram name, so I think he loves that.
I mean, I feel like a name goes a long way in fans identifying with a player, like a fun name, and Johnny Long is like, fans are going to like latch on to this guy. I'm really excited. So, yeah. I mean, let's dig into some of these players that we're going to see in Myrtle Beach this year. I've been for all these preview episodes. I got to preface this by saying that like I went in ahead of time. I've kind of assigned affiliates to each of these players, kind of gave projections for where I think that the lineups will look like, the rosters will look like going into the season. And that is like, we don't know where some of these guys are going to get assigned. I just want to be able to hit on all of the players that we can throughout this entire month of previews. And so as we're talking about certain players, they may get assigned to South Bend. They may start in the Arizona Complex League. We don't know. But I just want to preface this episode by saying that. I also want to lead off by saying, dude, we've got the hardest job here previewing a season where like we haven't seen these players, right? Like if we're previewing Tennessee, like we've seen the players play in Myrtle Beach and South Bend. Even South Bend, like we've seen the guys play with you guys in Myrtle Beach. It's like we've seen eyes, we've seen like actual full season stats as opposed to whatever the heck the stats are down in the Arizona Complex League, which get a little crazy. So looking at these players, like we're going to do our best here. You've done some research. I've done research. We've kind of kept up with these players in the complex league over time. And some of them are returners back to Myrtle Beach. But I guess to all the listeners out there, bear with us to a certain degree, because this one's a tough one. This is a toughie. So we've led off with the pitchers for all these episodes up to this point, but I want to lead off this time with some hitters. Because I think the storyline in the infield of having Christian and Alexis Hernandez both in Myrtle Beach is something that could be like super fun. I think both those guys playing up the middle could be a really fun concept. And I don't know, what's your first thought in terms of like, do we see Alexis at short? Do we see Christian at short? Who do we see at second base? Do they split time? I don't know. I'm really excited to see how Alexis Hernandez being assigned to Myrtle Beach, assuming Christian is there, how it like impacts Christian. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that I'll tell you, just coming off the spring break or spring training trip, there were a lot of positive words about Alexis, and I saw them both taking BP at the same time. They're at the same field, doing the same things together. They look very much alike, which is really fun. And
you're gonna have a heck of a time.
Oh, I know. But it'll be a cool storyline to have them both on the same team at two very different points of their careers, right? Because Christian is trying to bounce back from last year, and Alexis, who's hit pretty well last year, over 300 in the ACL, is now trying to turn some heads at the single A level. But, I talked with Buddy Bailey, our manager. I did an interview with him a few days ago, and I asked him, I said, who are some players that have maybe, taken a big jump? And his first guy he said was Alexis Hernandez. So he was really impressed with him. Now, watching Christian take BP, I can tell you he's a lot bigger. He's worked on the plate discipline. The swing is a lot more fluid. It's a lot more smooth. So I think you'll see an increase in production from Christian this year. We know that he struggled last year at the plate, good in the field, good on the bases, but it just couldn't hold up too much. He was swinging and missing way too much. The strikeout numbers were crazy. And, I think we see a lot of success stories with people that repeat Myrtle Beach and repeat the single A level. And I can definitely see Christian doing that, because we did see flashes last year where, that we were like, okay, this is where, this is why he's so talented. This is why he's been so highly touted. And now it's just about being consistent. And the fact that he's already been at this level, he's seen this kind of pitching. I think you'll see a big year from Christian. But having them both on the same team is going to be certainly a lot of fun. And I can't wait to see Alexis, playing a game for the first time. Just hearing so much about him at spring training and just seeing what he could do at the single A level.
Yeah, obviously not ideal as far as his season in terms of production last year for Christian. But honestly, like, it's one of those things where you saw the defense, and I was pretty impressed with the defense. The base running I thought was very good. Like, I thought the steals numbers, the caught stealings numbers, the ability to go from first to third, the ability to score from second on a base hit. Like, I thought he was really impressive on those things. And like, those are more like you expected them to be refined, both the defense and base running, as he climbs the system. So like, the fact that that's already there is actually kind of positive in my eyes. Now, we know he was not signed because of defense and base running. He was signed because he had a great looking swing, which the swing didn't look nearly as good last year as it did, like we've seen from like batting practice videos of him before he was signed. I'm curious to see, like, as he gets back, as he's stronger now, how he like can maybe regain some of that athleticism at the plate and be a little better. So like, we know that the basis is already set there as he continues to climb the ladder. So I'm really excited to see Christian and Alexis for that matter. But like, and I think that the Alexis promotion up to Myrtle Beach and Christian still being there might be like a kick in the butt for Christian in the best way possible too, right? Like, he's like, now his like little brother is there. I think that's like something that like motivates him a little bit more. Really excited for these two to like play with each other and side by side up the middle and kind of see that relationship on double plays,
Yeah, well, I can tell you, if they're both in Myrtle at the same time, you'll probably be getting a feature story out of it, which we've been doing the past few years. But it would be a really cool storyline. But like you said, I think that a wake-up call, would do some good for him, because it's always good to have some competition in the clubhouse and, challenge yourself to get better. Now, as far as, who plays short, who plays second, I know that Christian got bumped over to second base because of Rojas at shortstop last year with Myrtle Beach. So I don't know. They might try and mix and match the two. It kind of depends on who else we have.
Yeah.
If they're on the Pelicans at the same time. But Christian took that move to second base in stride, and he was just happy to get on the field. So we'll see what happens.
On the bright side, I think for those two, I'm looking at guys that are kind of projected as potential starters in the infield at Myrtle Beach. And who I have left that I want to talk about today are Reggie Preciado, Christopher Pasiola, and Drew Bowser, all guys that are more at this point corner infielders, right? I think that all three can pretty much play third or first. Let's start with Preciado, talking about the performance we saw from him the past couple of years down at Myrtle Beach. Obviously not ideal. He's still only 20 years old, is Reggie Preciado, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, he was traded for what seems like 10 years ago, and he's still only 20 years old.
Well, I told BK and Mesa a few days ago, I said, man, like, that Darvish trade was wild because you have Preciado and you have Mena, who just got to us last year, who also is really young. It was just such a big chance on those trades, and it takes a while for the the back end and the return to kind of be productive for you. But Preciado is a guy that I feel bad for. He has really dealt with some injury problems the past 2 years, and last year it was tough because, he barely got a start and then got injured. I think it was a hand injury, if I remember right, and doesn't come back to us the rest of the year, and I think only plays like 7 or 8 games in the complex league. So you got basically 2 years washed out from you. And I saw him in Mesa at the complex. First thing I asked him, "Are we healthy?" He says, "Yeah, we're healthy. We're feeling good." So let's hope for a full season from Preciado so he can show off what he can do, because you can tell he's so naturally gifted, tall, lanky, but he's got a good frame, and he's got a lot of speed. He's a good fielder. Now he's trying to put the bat together because he's had such a strikeout problem the past couple of years, but he just hasn't really been comfortable. So you think, all right, get him a month down. Let's get healthy through that first month and then kind of hit the ground running. I think you'll see a big year from Preciado. I think he's going to get put back on the map for Cubs fans who have kind of forgotten about him. And I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, I think anything we get from him is kind of icing on the cake after seeing what Owen Casey has done. It takes some pressure off of him a little bit, right? For that return from Yu Darvish, like the fact that Owen Casey was the Cubs prospect of the year in the system last year, like, and he's a top 50 guy. All right, now like anything we get from Preciado is just kind of icing on the cake. I think that I'm expecting to see more third and first from him this year than second and short. I think we kind of moved off that he's a big dude, right? He's 6'5", 6'4". As he continues to build out his frame, he has ditched the switch hitting, I've heard. So kind of seeing that, I think that's going to be huge for him developmentally at the plate. He can kind of focus on one thing. So, I'm really excited to see what we get from him in a hopefully full healthy season. We can stick at third base in Christopher Pasiola, which that's a guy that you have not seen in Myrtle Beach yet. He was drafted a few years back. He was drafted as a shortstop. He's a third baseman at this point. And I feel like people have kind of forgotten about him to a certain degree. He continued to kind of build out. When he was drafted, he was about as lanky as they come. He's continued to put on some strength, continued to work on his defense at third base down in the complex league, and didn't put together like ridiculously good stats in the complex league, but like good enough that like you feel confident with him being assigned to Myrtle Beach and being like relatively ready to roll. And I think that like what we've seen over the past couple of years down at Myrtle Beach and all the low A levels for all the teams, you're getting a lot younger talent in Myrtle Beach than you were 4 years ago, right? 4 or 5 years ago. So Christopher Pasiola may be super young still, but I think that like he won't look entirely overmatched during his time in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, you mentioned his youth and the fact that we're getting younger and younger as the years go on. He was actually a player that I was kind of shocked didn't get a cup of coffee in Myrtle Beach last year, especially at the end of it when the complex league ended. Now we did have a pretty loaded infield, especially when Johnny Long and Brian Calmer came in. That was kind of tough for him to get playing time at the corner spot. But he's a guy that we've heard his name for a couple of years now. And Greg, I'm going to tell you what, the offensive numbers weren't, it's not going to jump out at you from the ACL, but the strikeout numbers did. The fact that he struck out 31 times and 127 at-bats, I think is awesome. And, obviously that's a problem for young hitters. They're going to swing at anything they can see. And so the fact that he's that disciplined at such a young age catches my eye. And just his scouting report says there's not a lot of swing and miss. Mm-hmm. So, you hope that he can carry that composure and that comfortability into the single A level when the pitching increases. But, like you said, the ACL has so many crazy things going on and guys are working on different things. But if you're not striking out in the ACL, something's going right for you.
everything about him just seems very methodical from the way that he kind of puts up numbers, the way he's getting a little bit stronger to the way the Cubs are developing him, right? It seems very methodical in the way they're approaching his development. So let's go to the last guy here I have in the infield, Drew Bowser, which I don't know, man. I think that he might be one of the fan faves down in Myrtle Beach. I think that he is not cut from the same cloth as Matt Mervis and Hayden McGeary and Brian Calmer and Johnny Long. There's a lot more swing and miss in Drew Bowser's game, and him being like a power first guy may not play the best in Myrtle Beach, where power is not easy to come by. But I think that when he gets into some of these pitches, like I think it's going to be really fun. You're going to have some great home run calls of Drew Bowser, I think.
I can't wait. Looking at this video from Stanford, it looks awesome. And the fact that he was a power first guy on a Stanford team that doesn't really have a lot of power traditionally,
Yeah,
I think is great. And, he was a two-time Pac-12 champion at Stanford. When he was drafted, he was one of 9 Stanford players that were in the draft. So just a lot of talent around him. And, you kind of read what he's done in his career so far. And he went to the Cape Cod League for a couple of years and really struggled with the wood bat and the increased competition over there. So, you kind of wonder how that talent is going to translate now to the single A level. He bounced around the infield at Stanford, played the corner spot, played second base as well. But yeah, I mean, the power is real. It's just a matter of, can he swing at the right pitches and just be comfortable at the plate. But yeah, watching that video from his time as a Stanford Cardinal was certainly really fun.
I think that I mean, different players. But you look at a guy like Felix Stevens when talking about Drew Bowser, and it's like we talk about Steve. We talked about Stevens last week with Max and BK, and it's like, man, if he can just like not strike out 35% of the time, not even like 30,
Yeah.
like not even less than 30, just less than 35% of the time, the power might play. Now, Drew Bowser has not proven as a professional that he has the type of light tower power that Felix Stevens has. But like that is kind of like the picture I'm painting in my head at this point until we start seeing more of his action live on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Felix Stevens, and I was listening to your last episode with Max and BK, and I think Max said it from the gas station that he was at. But the fact that Felix Stevens ended with like 27 or 28 home runs, I can't remember what his final number was. I didn't realize that. I mean, I keep up with the guys. I kept up with what Biestefeld was doing. I was watching Felix for a little bit. But the fact that he kept that power going throughout the season and hit the same, if not more, home runs at a higher level than he did in Myrtle Beach, really says something. So, but even with Felix, though, he came to the Pelicans at the end of 21, spent the whole year with Myrtle Beach in 22, and didn't have the kind of success he had in 23. So, it took a year to get comfortable and see that pitching. He found his swing. He got a lot more disciplined, and then he took off. So, with these guys, it does take a little bit because there's such a jump from the ACL to Myrtle Beach.
I was going to say, I think that's important to remember with whether we're talking about Drew Bowser and the struggles that he might see this year in 2024 or Christian Hernandez and the struggles he saw last year. Like, this is Myrtle Beach. Like, this is the first full season stop these guys have. They're all super young. They've got plenty of time still left in the organization. You can't watch a guy have a bad year and then write him off as like a bust or write him off as like this guy's not going to be what I hoped he could be. There is still there's still more time that he can have in Myrtle Beach, let alone his time in the organization as a whole. You know what I mean? And I think that like whether it's Christian or if Drew Bowser struggles this year, whatever it might be, like that's not the finished product. That's not even close to the finished product. That's maybe just the first product they put on the field. There's still like multiple different adjustments that need to take place, whether it's swing adjustments or if you're a pitcher, it's brand new pitches. It's a velo program. Like there's so many different ways when you're 18, 19, 20 years old that like, let's not get worried about these guys quite yet.
Yeah. Matt Mervis is the best example of that. Yep. The fact that he struggled so much in Myrtle Beach and then 22 was the minor league player of the year for the Cubs and then made his Cubs debut in 23. I think that kind of encapsulates everything that this level is. And, it's almost becoming like an ACL where, guys are working on specific things and trying to get acclimated to professional baseball, rather than showing their finished product, which you might see in like a Tennessee or Iowa. But There's definitely a lot going on, and the stats don't tell the whole story.
Yeah. Let's talk about the two catchers that I have projected for Myrtle Beach. We don't need to spend too much time. There's no Moises Ballesteros behind the plate in Myrtle Beach this year. With all due respect to Carter Trice and Adon Sanchez, those are the two catchers I expect to be there. Two very different stories of those guys, right? So Carter Trice was drafted last year. He was a infielder, outfielder for NC State in college. Got drafted by the Cubs and immediately converted back to behind the plate. And then Adon Sanchez is a guy who was signed a pretty hefty signing bonus as an international free agent. Has struggled a little bit during his time in both the Dominican League and the Arizona Complex League. Kind of hoping he kind of figures it out a little bit in Myrtle Beach. Two very different stories. What excites you about those guys' stories?
The catcher conversion program strikes again. I was reading about Carter, and when he was drafted, I read that obviously he was an infielder, outfielder, and played for a couple different schools, Old Dominion and NC State.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Cubs want him to become a catcher, so that's always a really fun story when you have a guy that's transitioning positions. Miguel Pabon last year, it was his first full year as a catcher, and you can see him, what he was working on and just developing to get better throughout the season. So watching that with Carter is going to be great. But how many times do you see a 2023 draft pick play in the Arizona Fall League? And not only that, but he hit a home run in the Fall League, which was great. I think he was the only 2023 draft pick that was in the Fall League that year. So he's already coming in with a decent amount of experience. I think he only played in 5 or 6 games, but he was able to be around those guys for a little bit. And he didn't play in all those games, but he was still working with the Fall League guys, and he was still catching their bullpens and trying to figure out that position. So I think that's really fun, and is going to make for some good development. And then Adon Sanchez,
I was going to real quick comment on Carter. It's amazing to me that a guy can go from being drafted last year as predominantly second base, right? He was a second baseman, and now less than a full year later, he's going to suit up behind the plate, catching professional pitchers in full season ball. Like that entire thing is just so wild to me that a guy can just be that athletic and take to coaching that well that he can do that. I know when I interviewed and had Bryce Windham on the show, great example of another catcher conversion, right? Where he was an infielder. Bryce converted over to catcher. He was also an Old Dominion guy. I was talking to Bryce. I asked him if he was planning on talking with Carter Trice during his time in spring training. He said he'd kind of take him to the side a little bit and give him some pointers on that conversion from infield to catching. And I think that Bryce Windham, there's not a better guy in the organization to try to learn from. That's for sure. But yeah. I wanted to point that I wanted to kind of emphasize how crazy that conversion is. And we saw, like you said, we saw Miguel Pabon do it. He's a guy that everybody seems to love. Everybody loves Miguel Pabon. So I think that Carter and Adon have some big shoes to fill in terms of Moises Ballesteros and Miguel Pabon.
Yeah, and I tell you what, when I was on the backfields in Mesa, I'm standing there with Rich Biestefeld, our photo correspondent, and I saw a guy walking up in catcher's gear, and they were, it was one of those sim games, right? So it was basically the spring breakout lineup, just going up against pitchers throwing live bullpens, and the guy catching them was Carter Trice. And I looked for a second and I was like, was that Hayden McGeary? And then I kind of, I saw him come closer and I was like, okay, no, that's Carter Trice. But he's not as big as McGeary is, but he's got a lot of size to him.
Yeah.
And he's a strong kid. So just seeing him kind of adjust is going to be interesting. And then Sanchez, when I was back in Mesa last year, he was a name that kept getting brought up when I talked with Stephen Polakov, Buddy Bailey, guys around the system that know about, who's going to Myrtle. Sanchez was a guy that I kept hearing his name. Now I know that he struggled, like you said, in the Dominican and the Arizona Complex League last year. But the Cubs value him, and there's definitely going to be a spot for him, in this organization. So, we'll see what he comes out with in Myrtle Beach next year.
Let's transition to the outfield, and we'll start off with a guy that you got a haircut based off of him, right? Andy Garriola is likely returning back to Myrtle Beach. And man, if we talk about guys that you talk about the Matt Mervis, how he struggled in his first taste of Myrtle Beach, and then he ended up turning it back on. I'm again not putting expectations of Andy Garriola being the Cubs player of the year in the farm system, but he ended up not putting up great numbers during his season last year in Myrtle Beach, but like he looked good, did Andy Garriola.
Yeah, he had some stretches. I mean, there was a week in Fredericksburg where he was just on a tear, and he ends up winning Carolina Player of the Week, and that was in July. And then it was toward the end of July, and then August he just completely cooled off. And the problem with Garriola, I think, was pitch recognition, because if you threw him a breaking ball away, he was going after it every single time.
Yeah.
So I think that this year in his development, we're going to see if he can hold off on that swing and miss, if he can hold off on those outside pitches, and maybe force pitchers to throw him the pitches that he likes, because when he gets one, he gives it for a ride. So we did see flashes. He's got a great tool set. He's fast. I mean, he's a quick runner, stole like 12 or 13 bases. So he was effective there. He's a good fielder in left. He's got a decent arm and a ton
Also
of pop
jacked.
off the ball.
He's also jacked.
He's jacked. I mean, I think we talked about this in the Myrtle preview episode last year, how he's just like super muscular, and he is like, he's a really strong dude. So now it's just like, can we get smarter at the plate and show off those tools a little bit more? But yeah, I think you'll see some big steps from Garriola. He told me in Mesa that he's been working on a lot of stuff and, feels really good and feels more confident. So
last week, Max and BK were talking about, like, you go down and see these guys assigned back and they're in the best shape of their lives, and it makes you feel really bad about yourself. Really, you can see how good the team worked in the offseason based on how bad you feel about yourself, like when they return.
Yeah, it's a moment of self-reflection for sure. But no, like, it's a thing. I was telling BK this, man. It's like all these guys that we've had, like every single time you go to spring training and you see them again, they always look bigger. Like, no one looks like they've regressed, which is a good thing. Like, that means they're doing their stuff, in the off season. But like, just there's a lot of guys that just look more in shape, and they're ready. Their bodies are ready for another season, and Garriola's no different.
I want to hit on these three more guys in the outfield. I'll kind of group them together because I think you each of these guys you've seen a little bit of during during their time in Myrtle Beach. Ismael Mena, Leonel Espinoza, and Jefferson Encarnacion. All three of those guys spent at least a little bit of time in Myrtle Beach last year, some less than others. Any of those three guys that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I think, like, I touched on Mena earlier, the fact that he was in the Darvish trade back in December of 2020. And, we saw some talent from him, a couple of big flies. He's got a lot of speed on the base paths. I mean, he stole 13 bags and was caught only 5 times last year, but his like home to first speed is the quickest I've ever seen anybody.
Yeah.
And he was typically in center field and has a really good glove out there. So Mena will be fun to watch. Espinoza, we didn't have for all that long toward the end of the season. Just struggled at the plate, trying to get comfortable. So you get him more at bats and see what he can do. And then Encarnacion started with us last year.
Yeah.
And then it was at the end of May that he got sent down to Arizona. And again, with him, it was just, it was plate discipline. He wasn't getting great contact on the ball. And then he goes down to Arizona and hits 296 and, cuts down on those strikeout numbers and walks a lot more. And, he's a really interesting story in the fact that, he was with the Phillies system and then has a massive injury, I think in his second year in the organization. And, he's able to work himself back from that. The Cubs like what they have in him. They obviously value him with him, being sent to Myrtle Beach last year. And, we'll see what we can get out of him. Hopefully, it's more of a refined and polished player this season.
Yeah, you're right. It's Encarnacion and Espinoza kind of took opposite paths last year, where they both spent just a little bit of time on the bookends of the season. So that's kind of weird. But I mean, I think that with Mena, it's the defense and speed, right? I mean, I think that he has of this trio. I'll say that he has the best chance of sticking in the organization for longer because of the glove and defense, or the defense and base running. I mean, that doesn't go into a slump. He showed off a pretty good arm, throwing out a few runners last year too. And so I think between those skill sets, like he'll continue to rise to the system. Unless he's hitting like 100, you know what I mean? That's something that can continue to work up in South Bend and Tennessee. And the other is I really liked what we saw from Jefferson Encarnacion. I know that the pitch recognition wasn't there. I think we talked about it probably mid-season last year with Encarnacion. It's like he's just a guy I kind of like what he has to offer. He actually got into a major league spring training game this I think a couple of weeks ago or this past week. I like what I've seen from him. He just needs to hit the ball harder and he needs to show better pitch recognition skills. But like I think the base of like what he is as a player is there and impresses me a little bit.
He was kind of a shocking demotion last year. Like, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when he went down, I was like, that's interesting, because it was
Mm-hmm.
his first taste of Myrtle. Like I can't remember how old he is, but like he's an age
Super
where you
young,
should
yeah.
be in single A.
Mm-hmm.
And, him going down, it allowed Rafael Morel to move out of the infield and go out to right field where Encarnacion was. So that gave him more reps in the outfield and helped his transition. But yeah, I hope the best for him this year. Because like you said, like just not hitting the ball hard enough. But if something can click, and he can put something together, I think he can turn out to be a pretty good ball player.
Real quick side note on a player we covered last week. What do you think Rafael Morel's best position defensively is? Because I think what he does so well is he plays a lot of positions, and I love that.
Yeah, that was a really cool storyline to watch last year. Was him kind of take the path of his brother and just be a guy that knows how to play a lot of different positions. Um, he made some mistakes in right field. There was definitely it was a learning curve, and it was a place that he wasn't super familiar with. I liked him at third. I think third was my favorite position from what I saw and where he was at. Just looked comfortable there. Has a good arm for third base, and he was a bat last year where it was like you're consistent enough to get daily at bats. Like we want you in this lineup. So the fact that he had to move to the outfield to stay in the lineup was just what had to happen. But a lot of progression from Rafi in the outfield, and yeah, it was cool having him on the team last year and following his development and seeing how he became so well rounded around the field.
Yeah, I think I made the comment that Morel may not be a starter for South Bend, but he's going to get a starter's worth of at bats over the course of the season because he's going to be playing 6 different positions probably for the South Bend Cubs, which is fun.
Yeah,
All right, man, you want to go to the pitchers here?
let's do it.
All right, let's start off with the starters here. And we got Luis Rujano, who has I've adopted as my guy here. You got quite a bit of action from Rujano, actually, which was his promotion up to Myrtle Beach last year was kind of surprising. But then he came up, he looked pretty decent. He kind of showed off quite the pitch mix, and then ended up finishing off the season in Myrtle Beach. What do you like about Luis Rujano? And tell me
Yeah,
why I'm right about him being my guy.
I think that's a perfect choice because I was going through because I have to remind myself, because it's been since September and I got to get back in like minor league baseball mode. So I went back, I watched a few of his starts and I saw his numbers and I was like, I wouldn't be shocked if he maybe starts in South Bend. Like he was that good last year because he's got a full arsenal. Really good changeup, really good slider that we saw from Rujano. And he was able to not only have success in a starter's role, but also a reliever. He got changed to a starter, I think, halfway through the season, but he was really successful coming out of the bullpen as well. The ERA in the middle of the summer was very low, and he was just able to get guys out, whether it was a strikeout or lazy hit ground balls. He was able to pitch. So now it's like that next step where you have so many deadly pitches and deadly weapons. Let's manage those and kind of navigate through a ball game, keep the pitch count down, and take that next step. But there's definitely tools there for Luis, and a really really good year in Myrtle Beach. If he starts with us, I think it's just about refining that and taking the steps that he's taken in spring training, and then I could see him being in South Bend pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm watching his fastball. That's what I got my eye on for him this year because the slider is great.
Yeah,
The slider when it's on, like it's one of the best pitches in the system, I think.
yeah,
But he's got to have the good fastball to get some more swings and misses. I'll say with all these starters we're covering, I think that we could probably instead of going starters relievers, which we will, we could almost just go like pitchers in general because at Myrtle Beach, like there's a lot of piggyback action with guys going three, maybe 4 innings. Early on in the season, the pitch counts are going to be super low. Like it's you're going to have a heck of a time with all the pitching changes throughout a game. But like we'll continue looking starter reliever. I think the Rujano is a starter, but I think that it's still super early. Like we could see the Cubs eventually fall back on him as using that slider to kind of headline him in the bullpen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And I mean, again, like last year, he thrived in both positions. But Greg, you mentioned the pitch count. I've been calling a lot of college baseball this year for Coastal Carolina,
Yeah.
and it's like when I see a pitcher go 5 or 6 innings, I'm like, whoa, like this is awesome because our guys go. I mean, if you get a starter go 4 innings in Myrtle Beach, it's like shocking. But college
That's
baseball
so
has some more.
backwards, right? Like
It's
it's
crazy.
that they have a longer leash in college than at low A.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, different priorities and all that. I was calling Coastal Carolina, Michigan about a week and a half ago, and there was a reliever that, he went 4 1/3 innings, which is long for a reliever, but like, in the grand scheme of things, starters in college go 6 or 7. And I remember I said, "Oh, he's got a rubber arm. He's just going out there and throwing." It's just, I'm just used to, the guys being on pretty strict pitch counts and not really
Yeah.
seeing too much of them.
Yeah. I'm excited because I think that uh, back to Ruhano, I think he's got like the starting pitcher body. Like he looks like he's a big dude on the mound. He looks like he could be an innings eater if it comes to that later on in his career.
Yeah.
Let's talk Luis Martinez Gomez, LMG. Uh, I he's kind of my pick to be a little bit further along than Ruhana was last year. I think that we might see him assigned to Myrtle Beach out the gate. We got, I think, 3 or 4 games of LMG last year in Myrtle Beach out of the bullpen, obviously. He was kind of a surprise pick in the draft last year where, like, apparently he has some pretty damn good stuff. We didn't get to see, obviously, a ton of it in Myrtle Beach, but, like, I'm excited to see some LMG action.
Yeah, he was. He had a good outing his first game, and then fell apart in his next 2 or 3. But again, like we barely even saw him, and
Mhm.
the control was an issue, but it was an issue for a lot of guys that came up around his time. Um, so yeah, if he can hone that down and hopefully made improvements in spring training. When he was drafted, we didn't really know a lot about him, and he was probably a guy that went out through a bullpen, and a scout was there. They saw that he had a lot of good stuff, and next thing you know, he's in the Cubs organization. So, when that happens, it's about, refining pitches, adding pitches to the arsenal, and, just trying to figure out who you are as a pitcher. And I think for him, this year could be a big one to build on that.
Yeah, he could, if he is technically a starter, again, with LMG, it's going to be a pretty small amount of pitches thrown throughout the game. But guys that could see a little bit more pitches throughout a game are 2 college arms that were drafted last year. Will Sanders and Ty Johnson. I want to talk about Will Sanders. Absolutely could be assigned to South Bend out the gate. Like I think that that's a very real possibility with Will. Obviously he is not Cade Horton, but we saw Cade Horton last year start off in Myrtle and kind of work his way up. I think that we might see the same path with Will Sanders this year. Drafted out of South Carolina, big dude, as is Ty Johnson, who was drafted out of Ball State, where I went to school. So I'm a big Ty Johnson guy, obviously. Uh, College guys tend to succeed when they're assigned to Myrtle Beach out the gate.
Yeah, no, they definitely do. And it's totally different for them as it is for like, guys that pitch in the Dominican or
Yeah.
wherever, the Latin players, because they're not used to the stadium feel
Yeah.
and the amount of fans and the pressure, But I love the SEC, the Big 12, like the big
The
time
Mac.
college baseball pitchers that we're able to get. What'd you say?
The Mac.
The MAC, yeah, of course, the MAC.
Yeah, you
Hey,
forget.
Ball State's got a respectable program.
They do. They've been churning out some draft picks, some pitchers too.
Yeah, no doubt about
Just
it.
saying.
But like with those kind of guys, like they, that they're used to the pressure, especially Will Sanders. He's pitched in some really big ball games. So that's not something that you have to teach to him. Like he's already going to be composed on the mound. And yeah, I agree with you. It could be a Cade Horton kind of deal where he's not in Myrtle Beach for long, but just seeing what he has, a pretty full arsenal, a good fastball, slider, changeup, curveball mix, and got injured his last year at South Carolina, so the numbers weren't great. But bouncing back from that and defining yourself as a professional pitcher is going to be interesting. And then your boy Ty Johnson, chirp chirp, pretty high velocity fastball, and then it's just about the control with him
Yeah.
because did walk a lot of guys in his senior year at Ball State or his last year at Ball State. So just kind of refining and finding the zone a little bit more.
Yeah, I think both these guys are like I'm just looking at the pitching development in this organization and like I just look at these two guys as like the perfect like ball of clay for the pitching development team to mold. And Will Sanders is already there more than Ty Johnson is in terms of like having that pitch mix and having a little bit more command, obviously. I just have all the faith in the world in this Cubs development staff to make these guys into the best possible versions of themselves. What that ultimately looks like, I don't like. Maybe it's Ty Johnson in the bullpen in Tennessee come next year, right? Maybe it's Will Sanders looking like what Brody McCullough or what Connor Noland or some of these guys who really performed well outside of Cade Horton last year. Maybe he looks like that. I think I just have a lot of faith in these guys performing to the very best of their abilities based on the coaching and the development that they get.
Unless your name is Cade Horton, like everybody needs work, everybody needs instruction. And, I think about Grayson Moore from last year, who came to Myrtle Beach, a draft pick out of Vanderbilt. So he's at one of the top college baseball schools. And he had some outings where, he struggled. And it wasn't like, oh, we got a Vanderbilt guy. This guy's going to mow everybody down. Like that didn't happen. So there are some adjustments. Professional baseball is hard. Like that's just how it is. So you got to adjust. You got to become, you got to become a professional, and you got to be more refined and polished, like I keep saying. And that's certainly something that starts in Myrtle Beach.
Let's go ahead and switch off to the relievers that again might be starters. Who knows? There's not a whole lot of guys. That bullpen, I got to say, when I'm projecting who is going to land where to start off the year, the Myrtle Beach bullpen is by far the most difficult to predict. Let's start off with Starlin and Scarlin. You saw both those guys last year in Myrtle Beach. That's Starlin Picardo and Scarlin LeBron. Both guys that flashed some really good stuff last year, but I would assume will probably be assigned back to Myrtle Beach this year.
I think with Starlin Pichardo, I think that with him, the control was really good for what he was. I mean, 29 walks in 40 innings, and decent ERA. But he only allowed in 40 innings, he allows 2 home runs. So he's not giving, he's not serving up too many softballs right in the middle of the plate. He's dotting, he's moving it around and painting the corners. And then Scarlin also really good control, 22 walks and 46 and 2/3. But he only had 40 strikeouts in that time. So with LeBron, like you want him to find a strikeout pitch and kind of, work on those more to get more swings and misses. But yeah, last year, I mean, we got Starlin and Scarlin on the same day. So that made for a lot of confusion. I think that I had Starlin wearing Scarlin's number at first, and then the other one flipped, and it was like it was a double header day too. So there was a lot of commotion going on. But once we figured out who each one was, like we were good, and they proved how good they were on the mound. And Starlin, like when Jozan Okendo got promoted to South Bend halfway through last year, Starlin kind of took that role as like the clubhouse bullpen leader. He's a big jokester, a really fun guy, and the guys really like him. So he's got some leadership qualities and certainly some really good stuff.
You got any more LeBron James, Scarlin LeBron jokes or comments up your sleeve this year?
Dude, I don't even know if I threw that many out last year because I'm like
they write themselves. I mean, it's just out there. Like his name's out there. You don't need to make the comments. You know what I mean?
Well, right. Like it speaks for itself. And also, like for the longest time, I kept asking people on the team about it because I wanted to make sure it was LeBron and not like a different pronunciation.
Yeah.
And I didn't sound like an idiot. But as far as I know, it is Scarlin LeBron. And we'll see what the King has in store for this year.
I love it. All right, man. I got one more guy on my reliever list here that I want to kind of throw his name out for Myrtle Beach that did spend time last year in Myrtle, a little bit of time. Dom Hambley. We saw him make, I think, just a few appearances, right, in Myrtle Beach. But he was a guy that was drafted as a high schooler. Later in the draft, he was a commit to Oregon State. There was a whole lot of love being thrown his way after the draft. Another guy that just kind of needs to rein it in a little bit, right? He needs to find the zone a little bit more. But I think that some of his off-speed offerings are really good.
Yeah, he definitely has some pieces. And, you could tell that he was a little in over his head last year. But at this point, he's been with the organization for a while,
Mm.
picked in 2021, and you hope that he's more comfortable coming into this year. It wasn't a very long stint in Myrtle Beach last year, but now it's familiar. He knows where, he knows what the clubhouse looks like. He knows what the stadium looks like. He's pitched on that mound before. So now he can build off those things and put together some success. But Dom is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. I met him briefly last year and actually talked to him again a little bit in Mesa a couple of days ago. But yeah, you want the best for him and hope that, like you said, he can rein it in and just put better numbers up there. I want to mention one more arm just because I got to talk to his dad in spring training, Mason McGuire.
Yeah.
So reporting his dad's words, not mine, his dad's words, Mason feels good. So
there you go.
He should have we don't know where he's going to start, but if he starts at Myrtle Beach, he'll feel good. That's what Mark says.
I mean, you just name dropped first name Mark as in Mark McGuire, which is pretty wild. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, well, the story is that I was interviewing Buddy on the backfields and he goes, "Oh, you might want to interview Mark." And me and Hunter look over and, Mark McGuire is standing there. So we both, we met him and talked to him for a little bit. And he said, when Mason gets to Myrtle Beach, he's never been to that part of the country before. So he's interested in coming and seeing him pitch and which would be unbelievable. But yeah, super cool guy to talk to. It was weird seeing him in Cubby Blue. But that was me and Hunter, it didn't really hit us until that night. We're sitting at the pool and it's like, man, we just talked to Mark McGuire today. That was pretty cool.
Dude, I saw what you posted that you had little does he know that he was on your lunchbox growing up or something like that, right?
Yeah, man, I had a lunchbox with a picture of Mark McGuire on it when I was in first or second grade. And 6 or 7 year old Sam would be freaking out right now.
That's incredible. Yeah, I saw that picture you posted with you and Mark McGuire. It's like, oh my God. I mean, the fact that we're talking about Mark McGuire in Cubs gear before we're talking about Sammy Sosa back in Cubs gear, a little depressing, but oh well. That's it'll still make some Cardinals fans mad, and that's what I'm all about.
That's right.
All right, man. I think those are all the names that I had here to specifically talk about. Were there any other players that you saw during your time, any position, anything like that, that you saw during your time in Mesa, where you had plenty of action that you're really looking forward to watching in Myrtle Beach this year?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not really sure what the plan is, but Nazir Mule. Sorry, I gotta get that name right. But Mule, he was pitching on the mound. I think that Rich posted some pictures of him throwing. So he was getting some work on the mound, and two-way player. I'm not sure. Obviously, the Cubs emphasized the pitching side because he was out for all of last year, and I'm not sure when he's going to return. But he was throwing, so if we can get him in Myrtle Beach, I think that'll be a really fun name to watch.
Yeah, it sounds like Mule is now only just pitching at this point, like you kind of hinted at. That's the report is that he's kind of ditched, according to I think that Sahadev Sharma reported that over at the Athletic. That he's focusing on pitching, kind of ditching the two-way thing. I don't care, man. I'm excited to see what the athleticism on the mound is going to play, the fastball. I know he had a really good slider as well. Like you said, I think that he will not be opening day in Myrtle Beach, but the day that he gets assigned there's going to be a lot of people talking about Mule in Myrtle Beach. That's going to be exciting.
Yeah, that was a a very big draft pick. There was a lot of buzz around it. Michael Carrico, who played very minimal amount of time with us last year because he got hurt. He's somebody that gets on base like crazy. I mean, he led the entire country in college in 22 at Davidson in on base percentage. He knows how to work an at bat and, is very smart at the plate. And he hit a home run with us last year. And it was the most majestic left-handed swing I've ever seen. So getting him back there, getting him possibly behind the plate, mixed with a little bit of DHing, would be great to see from him.
Yeah, I'm excited for Carrico, dude. I don't know if it's I think that he may be maybe not outside or right at opening day gets assigned to a full season affiliate. It may be Myrtle Beach, it may be South Bend. We might see him skip over Myrtle Beach this year, which I know we got to see him a little bit last year. But the dude, he can hit. Not only can he get on base and draw walks, but I think that he's got some pop. I think he's got enough skills at the plate that even if catching doesn't work out for him, I think that I could see him playing some first base and like having that bat play. Obviously, still a long ways to go to make sure that to be able to make that comment confidently, but the bat is good. Like I think the contact skills are there, the bat to ball skills are there, in addition to his like good eye at the plate. So yeah, Carrico, I'm excited about Carrico. I have him ranked higher than I probably should at this point in his career on my prospect list.
Yeah, he's a guy that you just, you wish you had for that playoff run against Charleston, but unfortunately things had to happen the way they did. But I got two more guys. I got Keyshawn Collier, who is a really interesting guy to watch because of just the kind of player that he is. Not power at all, but just smacks around base hits and gets on base. And he spent all last year in the complex league after being drafted in the 20th round in 22. So you wonder when he's going to get that call to Myrtle Beach, but not the biggest guy in the world, but he gets on base and hits well.
I mean, you saw Brett Bateman. I think that Keyshawn Collier and Brett Bateman are cut from the same cloth for sure.
Yeah, and Bateman was, his defense was so good at Myrtle Beach, and he was the perfect leadoff man that you wanted. I mean, he was just such a good hitter. And
dude, I made the comment about Bateman. I think was it last week with it must have been last week with Max and BK. I don't know if I made it on air or off air. That Brett Bateman is like who in MLB The Show, like you like when you're creating like a leadoff hitter, like you're making Brett Bateman, where it's like a high contact, no power, speed, defense, center fielder. Like that's the creative player for your like center field leadoff hitter.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he's got all the tools to bat number one. I got one more name, and this is a guy that I have no idea if he's going to make Myrtle Beach. He was in the Dominican last year, but I was told in Mesa, his name's Albert Gutierrez. He played in the Dominican last year, 247 average, 4 home runs. But apparently his nickname is the Buffalo, which is awesome. So it's like we got a Jaguar part 2.
The Buffalo,
dude, I
don't know. That might be better than the Jaguar. I don't know.
I mean, if he plays like a Buffalo, I don't know what a Buffalo plays like, but if he plays like one,
is he just like a huge dude? Is that why he's
That's what I heard. That's what I heard. Yeah, I didn't see him in Mesa when I was out there, but I was talking with one of our old video guys, Camden, who was with us in 2022, and he said that that's his nickname is the Buffalo, and he's got some buzz around camp, that's for sure.
Gutierrez, the Buffalo. Be on the lookout for him. That's actually a new. I mean, I've seen his name, but I haven't heard anything about Gutierrez up to this point. So that's my honestly, that being my first bit of information besides his stat line is perfect. That's great.
He's on your map now.
Are there any I guess transitioning away from the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, any guys that you've seen last year and years prior that you're just really excited to see throughout the Cubs farm system in its entirety?
Yeah, I think that's the most fun part is, watching them move up and succeed. And I mean, watching Christian Franklin in the spring training game, I think it was yesterday, hit a home run was really cool. He's one of the nicest guys you'll talk to. Very coachable. Has worked really hard to come back from that injury in 2022 when he missed the whole year. So seeing him have that success was great. I think that James Triantos is the guy that I'm watching the most, simply because like it's almost a little shocking that he's still in the organization and wasn't like a big piece in a trade, because you draft Matt Shaw and it's like, all right, what are the future plans for Triantos? And then he lights the world on fire in the fall league, and now you've got like a really, really good prospect on your hands. Not like he wasn't before, but like his trade value has just increased tremendously. So yeah, like I'm curious to see what this next year is going to have in store for him and kind of what his path to Chicago is.
So the thing with Triantos, like I think that I've said on this show before that like the expectation was, like you said, he'd be part of a trade package and probably highlighting a trade package for some major league talent this offseason. And I've said, I'm excited to see what he can do this year now that he hasn't been traded. But like, I really want to emphasize how important it is that like if James Triantos ends up putting together a really strong first half for the Tennessee Smokies this year, maybe he still does not stay in this organization. But like at this point, major league teams don't really trade away top 25, top 50 guys in all of baseball in trade packages. Like the value of, like we saw back in like 2015, 16, 17, that like teams were just trading away these top 25, top 50 prospects like it was nothing. And then like the returns was like the return, they would lose out on these guys and the return was not worth what they gave away. Recently, since like 2021-ish, those trades don't happen. Like if you're trading away one of those like really tip top prospects in all of baseball, you're getting back like Juan Soto, you're getting back those type of guys. So imagine if James Friantos, still super young, still about 20 years old, is this his age 21 season or age 20 season? If he does what he has been doing and continues to get better and performs well in the first half of the season in Double-A Tennessee, what he could get back in a trade is honestly kind of crazy. So that's important to look out for. Both like, and maybe even stays, maybe he hits well enough that the Cubs want to keep him in the organization, and that's great too. But like, I just think that the first half of the season is so important for Triantos.
No, I think you're right. And he's a player that it's impossible not to root for him. Again, one of the nicest guys I've talked to. And he works incredibly hard. Like he holds himself to a really high standard, which sometimes like in Myrtle Beach got in his way a little bit because he'd get, a little too in his head. But last year he really calmed down and like he expects himself to do well. And he really did last year and won a championship and then was the best hitter in the fall league this past year. So yeah, he's a guy that I'm going to have my eye on and see what he does in 24. And then the guys that we got last year at the end of it, Calmer, Long, and Bateman. Seeing what those guys can do at the higher level, especially Brian Calmer, because he got to us and just kind of took the Carolina League by storm. I mean, he won Player of the Month in his first month, and was just able to have so much power and plate discipline. So seeing how that translates to better pitching and some more talented players up at the higher levels, I think will be something to watch out for.
Yeah, man. All right. Anybody else you got, or should we wrap this up?
Frankie Scalzo, just because I love Frankie. So, and he's got a broadcasting future whenever he's done with baseball. So,
dude, the interview that you and BK did with Frankie was one of my favorites that I've ever seen. Actually,
that interview almost didn't happen because, we had Frankie. It was me, BK, and Frankie, and it was post breakout game cancellation. So we're outside of the complex, and that was actually the second take, because the first take was me leading it.
Okay.
And it was like, all right, we're here in Mesa. We're talking with Frankie Scalzo, all that. And it's pretty cold, so I'm kind of shaking. And I start tripping over my words, and I mess up. And I go, okay, no, we're not doing that. And then Frankie was like, oh, I can lead it. So it was like, all right, Frankie, it's your show, man.
And he just went for it. Was that the first take with him?
That was first. Yeah. That was first take with Frankie. And
he's gunning for your job, dude.
I know. Like he's a really good photographer. He's got a photography Instagram page. He's just a really cool guy. So seeing him get in some of the major league games at spring training and showing off what he has is really fun to watch. So he's a tremendous guy.
I'm setting a goal this year to do my very best to mention Frankie Scalzo Jr. in every single episode that I post throughout the season, somehow, some way, even if it's just to say his name.
He's one of your guys, man. You interviewed him, didn't you?
Yeah. Down in when he was in South Bend, I got a chance to interview him, and like, what a cool dude. I mean, I won't go on and on about him on the show because I do it plenty, but just a cool guy. Everybody's like fan favorite for sure.
Yeah.
100%. All right, Sam. You still got a little bit more Coastal Carolina baseball action going. We have 18 days until the Myrtle Beach Pelican season kicks off. Where can we find you in the meantime and listen to your work?
Yeah. Twitter is Sam_Wiederhaft. Instagram is @Wiederhaft. And then on the Pelicans channels as well, we're really ramping up our content, especially with spring break or spring training stuff coming out. So that's Twitter @Pelican Baseball, Instagram @Pelicans Baseball. There's going to be a lot of good stuff coming out there. But yeah, we're rocking and rolling, man. It's we're getting closer and closer to the start of professional baseball season, and it's been fun so far.
It is about that time. Sam, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate you always. For listeners out there, appreciate you. We really appreciate you tuning in and listening. You can find us anywhere where you find your podcast: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. You can find us on the Northside Bound YouTube channel. That is, give us a like, give us a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We really appreciate your interaction on these videos. It goes a long, long ways. It really does. You can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find the show on Instagram, Cubs on Deck Pod. You can find on Threads, all that good stuff. Go check us out. We really appreciate you guys' support, and we'll be back with the Iowa Cubs preview in one short week. Thanks, guys. Take care.